We are back. So the first map is New Orinoco. We shall see what the Civ matchup is going to be. It looks like Lucas is going with British. So I would expect Sabusa is likely going to stick with Germans. I don't expect him to British mirror. Spain. Okay. This should be an interesting matchup then, Spain against British on New Orinoco. It's going to force a heads-up fight, which Spain want. But at the same token, one of the advantages British will have on this map is that they have a wood trade, so the lack of trees will not hurt them nearly as bad as it will Spain. This version of Orinoco does not have Tupi, Zapotec, Caribs, or Maya. Instead, it has Incas as the natives, one of which you can get before 40, so you can get the train speed upgrade in advance. And you can also work it into your boom to get the mining upgrade, which helps speed up your boom a little bit. Looks like this spawn's super weird because the crossing is ridiculously tiny. The score in this series currently is 0-0. We're in the finals now, which is a best of 3. Whoever takes 2 games wins. Okay. Up to Lucas and Sabusa, I guess, to decide if they want to play it out or rematch. I will leave it to each of the individual players to make that call. Unless I feel that there's something massively broken, I'm not going to interfere and say that they should go ahead and rehost. So, I guess we're going to play it out on this setup, unless Sabusa says that he would like to rehost as a result of the way the map is set up. So the matchup is either way going to be Spain against Brits on New Orinoco. As I was saying, the natives on this map are replaced with the Incas, so you do get the fast train time that you get on Andes, and you also get that synergy effect of essentially having an anti-cav unit for your army that you can pump out at a rapid rate. On top of that, there's been some other changes to how the resources get laid out. One of the big problems for the map, though, is that it has a lack of trees, so your wood supply as you start to go into late game is pretty much severely diminished to the point where you have virtually no wood at the end of the game. That's why British have an advantage here, because British has the wood trade, and I would expect that, Lucas has taken South Sea Bubble, which gives you, you trade all of your coin for 1.25%, 1.25 times wood. So in this case, you can completely avoid having to gather much wood at all before 40. Just go and get a ton of coin, trade it, and have plenty of wood going into the fight. That should actually give British, beyond their normal economy benefit, a pretty decent long-term benefit. 120 coin treasure, pretty nice treasure to pick up early in the game. It helps to speed up some upgrades. Looks like we've also got 100 XP treasure. There's 100 food treasure over here. What else have they gotten so far? Another 100 XP treasure was picked up already. Some small coin treasures, and that's about it. So, boom-wise, Spain's fairly boring. It's basically a fast fortress boom. You're just going to go and age up straight from 1 to 2 now, because on the Treaty fan patch, Spain has been changed such that they get a fast age up to 3, and they get the 1,000 coin politician to age 4. So now the build order is essentially go straight into age 3, get your TCs, go straight in, or go to industrial, just keep aging along the line. It's a very standard boom. The only reason it was different at all on the regular version of the game is that the Spanish lacked the two politicians I mentioned earlier, the Philosopher Prince and the Tycoon politicians. Philosopher Prince giving you the fast age up, and the Tycoon politician giving you the 1,000 coin. So it slowed their boom down a little bit because they basically had to get they had to spend more had to gather more resources to age up, and they also got into age 3 a little slower, which slowed down their 3 TC boom. British, we discussed this yesterday when we saw the British game. Brits are a livestock boom civilization. The way their boom works is they start out with the first card they send being the ranching card that allows you to train cows. You go ahead and you build 2 livestock pens in age 1, and you get a total of 20 cows. Fatten them. You send the fattening upgrades, and then you send fulling mills, and you can gather from cows at an exceedingly fast rate. So you're going to wind up with a ton of food income off from a very small amount of villagers committed to it, and it also makes them very resilient to things like how their hunts are laid out, because it's not a huge deal as to how many hunts you get. You only really need your starting hunt. Then they start doing a manor boom, because producing their manors allows them to train, or gives them a free villager. Well, not free, it costs 25 wood, essentially. But you'll basically just boom a ton of manors, age up, and you do the, what I like to call age in a line method with British, where you basically go 2, 3, 4, 5, all in a row, where 1 TC from the point it starts aging to 2 never stops aging. Once the first round of cows pops, you start another 3 pens to start producing sheeps. And then you're going to go ahead and just get basically your 20 cow, 30 sheep, and keep doing livestocking throughout the game as your primary source of food income. Some players differ in the exact way they handle the distribution of villagers in the Imperial Age, where you can either put like a handful on mills and livestock, or you can put a decent amount on, or you can put them all on plantations and gather pure coin, and then just rely on livestocking, pulling off from the plantations to get you your food income. I would expect that Lucas is going to go that route, because that's what he did against Dictator in the matchup they had yesterday, and that is generally the more efficient route overall. So we can see here just the manor boom portion coming in. The first batch of cows is coming out. So I'd also expect to see the sheep start soon. You can see some really good micro there from Lucas. He's doing the delete micro with livestock, which is where as soon as you're going to go to gather it, you actually hit the delete key so it kills it, leaving the sheep there. And then when you go over and gather it, you don't have the animation where the villager tries to whack it in the head with a musket for a couple of seconds like you just saw there. Generally, you save like a few seconds over the course of the game doing that, but another benefit that it brings is that you can queue up that cow quicker to be able to get your maximum income going all over again. One of the things that Lucas is doing a little inefficiently here is overkilling some of these cows. You only really need 2 villagers to be able to gather optimally from a cow. So if you have too many on one cow, you're just burning time on it. We can see my brain's dying here. Sabusa is doing his standard fast fortress as I said he would be doing, building the TCs forward because you can see here's where all of his mines are. He's got basically 4 mines right around these 2 town centers, so it makes sense to place both of them forward closer to where he's going to be mining from. There we go. Now we're hitting Colonial, starting the sheep pens. This is the one thing where I think Lucas's build is a little inefficient, is that he could actually start his sheep a slight bit sooner. He favors finishing the manors over finishing or starting the sheep batch. My personal opinion is that it's better to start your sheep patch first, because the more sheep you have, the more income you're going to get off from them, and it snowballs throughout the game. We kind of saw that in Dick versus Lucas yesterday, where basically the score differential that Lucas got in the early game by speeding up manors and prioritizing them over sheep was negated after essentially 1 additional round of sheep that that dictator got out. So you're trading early game, slightly more villagers for a faster second batch of sheep and the food that comes out of that. Good adaptation from Lucas here, doing the smart thing of using a little bit of extra wood to go ahead and get the trade post to get the additional upgrade for mining. Essentially, you're getting an additional 20% to your mining rates so that you can get your age ups and your upgrades for everything else just a little bit faster. So we can see here, I think Sabusa could be doing a little bit better job of herding. His hunts are pretty far out, and if he was pushing this even further closer to his town centers, saves a little bit of walking time. He's also going to run low on hunts here pretty soon, and that's going to force the transition onto mills. He basically only has this and potentially this as like a full hunt that he can still gather. I have no idea what's going on in chat right now. Well, I guess I'll respond to the one thing I am seeing in chat that's been a talking point in the past, is whether or not the Treaty Fan Patch is intended to be integrated into the ESOC patch, and whether or not we would wind up building out like maps with custom triggers to be able to do the treaty balance changes versus sup. The amount of time that would take is ridiculous to develop a custom map versus just making a separate patch and just switching between the two. There's absolutely no reason you would invest that amount of time for that solution. So, I guess kind of back to the booms, though. Right now, you're just seeing standard stuff out of Spain, as I've said. Factories coming in now. We can take a look at shipment order, for any of you who are maybe slightly less familiar with how things pan out. British, as I said, ranching is first card, then stockyards, then wool staple ports, fulling mills, both factories. Pretty standard there. Spain, you start with capitalism, you send economic theory, then refrigeration, royal mint, and both factory cards, which is what we can see here. The problem with like casting treaty solo is that you're essentially sitting here just discussing how a boom is going, and both players right now are executing their booms correctly. There's no like massive things that I would say are like huge mistakes in either boom. Those two sheep are sitting there idle, 3 actually, but nothing too bad. Beyond that, you're seeing literally just bog standard booms out of both players, which is exactly what you'd expect. Imperial upgrades are coming in for Lucas now, and we've got additional settlers in the queue and cows just sitting there in the queue. So you're going to continue to see this throughout the game. Just kill cows, train cows, kill cows, train cows, kill sheep, train sheep, until we get to 40. This is a slight mistake by Sabusa that he actually waited until now to get this. Really, he should have tried to work this in either in age 3 or earlier in age 4, maybe in the transition period. I'm not even going to look at chat because it's just turning into a flame war about whether or not the direction taken for the patch is worth or like agreeable. There are different philosophies to how you patch a game. If you are going to sit there and like deal with something that's horribly broken, you have to make some large changes. The thing is, in order to really be able to test things out, you do have to make some large changes, and sometimes you do have to make a lot of changes and then realize, oh, that change wasn't necessary, let's scale it back. If you even look at it throughout like the Supremacy fan patches over the years, I guess the Age Sanctuary one was the very first one, and it had a much larger set of changes than the current ESOC patch, and it took multiple years to get to the point that the ESOC patch is at. I guess I'll talk a little bit about the Civ matchup as well, which is essentially British have the better economy, they have an inferior military, and they're going to basically be trying to drain out the Spain, whereas the Spain is going to be trying to run them over with their superior army. That's essentially how the matchup works. It's basically a timed life thing where Spain is going to try to just destroy the Brit in the first 10 minutes or so of the game before their bank of resources runs out, and the Brit can just continuously outproduce them. Away. Oh, and for those of you looking at the player names and going, who the hell are these people? Lucas is the only one that's expected. Rodrigo is Sabusa. And then the other one is myself, which is _pi. Some of the difficulty has been, in terms of balancing it, is that to figure out exactly what feels right, you essentially have to go ahead and make a very drastic change to see how it affects the game. If it has too big of an effect, you scale it back. If it's not enough, you scale it forward. It's generally better to make incremental changes the more you play, but you can't really easily do that unless you can iterate extremely quickly on every single change. So a lot of times the first revision of something is going to be larger because it's going to have more changes to test and validate, and then you're going to go in and say, half of those aren't necessary. Especially because generally you're brainstorming more in the early stages. Anyway, you can already see the score differential just continuing to grow. This is going to happen throughout the whole rest of the game. Essentially, Brit should be probably around a 2600 score with trade, and Spain should be around a 2k score, plus or minus. You can also see the resource distributions kind of panning out right now. Only 2k coin or 2k wood here because he's going to do the trade to get more. And you can see, as I said, Lucas is going the traditional route with Brits, which is to just build a ton of plantations and rely on livestocking for your food income until after 40. Boy, reading chat is going to give me cancer. Everyone calm down and chat. No more flame wars. Yeah, livestock is actually one of those things that I think is an interesting mechanic of treaty. And I would really enjoy seeing other mechanics like livestock that have a high skill cap and actually a huge payoff come into treaty. That's one of the downsides I feel to some civilizations. Like Portuguese have a very low skill cap. There's not a lot to master. It's just in the basic fundamentals of making a good unit composition and using their units effectively. British have a huge skill cap for a civilization because of the amount you have to dedicate to macro management through livestocking, and the amount you can dedicate between micro, macro, and everything else. There's a very high APM cap to them that a really good player can showcase and make British look overpowered, but a poor player can't extract the same amount of power out of the civilization. In this case, Brits basically have 100% of their vills on plantations. If you don't trade, you usually go about 20 to 30 villagers on wood, the rest on plantations. You can pretty easily just do 20 villagers on wood. I like to bank around 10k wood at 40 with British, because when you do the transition into longbows, if you already have that bank of around 10k wood, it's pretty significant because you're not really going to drain. If you're going natives, you have to bank even more, because otherwise you're going to get to the point where you're transitioning into longbows and you're basically already broke. At least on the wood side of things. And that's a really bad scenario to be in, because then you can't make the compositions you want to make. However, this is not a matchup where you transition to longbows very early. This is a matchup where you basically are in a spam war, and you're just going to try to out-spam Spain. Because if you transition to longbows too early before you can really build up a setup with towers, walls, and everything else to slow Spain down so lancers aren't coming at you from all sides, you're going to wind up losing out pretty badly then. Currently we are in game 1. There are 3 cards that British send for cowing. 4 actually in total. You send 1 to make cows, 2 to make them fatten faster, and fully mills, which allows you to gather from them more quickly. So you dedicate 4 cards into livestocking, but as a result, you're getting far faster gather rates than you would out of mills. And for comparison, in order to get your mill economy going, depending on the civilization, like for example Spain, Spain is investing 2 cards into milling. Portuguese invests 3 cards into milling. Any civ with food silos invests 3 cards into milling. You're essentially investing either 1 or 2 more cards into your food income to have income that will eclipse any milling setup at all, which is absolutely massive and worth the trade-off. Guys, please stop fighting in chat, good God. It does nothing to debate this stuff and have flame wars over these things. So, I guess back to the game. you can see here we're just continuing to see the livestocking income, and this is where you can see how insane livestocking rates are. We are 11 minutes from treaty ending, and he already has 35k food. He's going to be over 50k food by the time we hit 40, and he's never put a single villager on plantation or on mills. In fact, he's probably had no more than maybe 20 villagers total gathering all of his livestock. And you can see some really good management of his livestocking too. Here, where he's got one villager per sheep, which is the optimal number for sheep, because they're only 300 food, and with fully mills they gather fast enough that you're beating decay anyway. So you only really want to dedicate the villager seconds of one villager onto one sheep at a time. He just got a batch of cows, but he's probably upgrading, which is why he's not gathering these yet. But it's 2 villagers to a cow, 1 villager to a sheep, and that's the optimal number at which you're gathering fast enough that you are not going to have decay, but you're not over-gathering to the point where you're just wasting villager seconds for them to eat it slightly quicker. Looking at FB setup, pretty normal FB setup here from Lucas. One of the things that I was commenting on yesterday when we were seeing New Orinoco is in the case that we were having where the crossing was essentially here, I like the idea of having maybe 2 stables closer so you could get out 10 cav at a time after first fight. In this scenario, there's no, this FB should really never come into play because it's so far away that you're essentially going to be forced into FBing here. So making it too large is not really worth it. This may actually be a little too big because some of these things aren't really going to get used. You could get away with probably 2 barracks, a single artillery foundry, single stable, or something like that, just to train your army. Which is essentially what Sabusa's done. He's gone with a minimal FB here because he knows he's going to have to build it all forward anyway as soon as the fight starts, because you couldn't train from here realistically. The thing to also note with New Orinoco and Orinoco in general is whoever takes this crossing generally winds up winning the game, because you're going to push over the crossing and into your opponent's side, and at that point it's going to be fairly easy to wrestle away this native post, and then you're just going to be sitting here fighting against someone with 3 natives potentially. You fight almost entirely just to be able to get this crossing, and if someone takes it, the game is pretty much over. In order to remove the posts from walls, what you do is you build them in segments of 2 at a time, and then you select one of the posts and you do Control-Shift-A to select all, and you delete them. If you build them 2 at a time, so I build 2 stretches like this at a time, they'll generally overlap such that you don't actually have gaps that you can pass through, but you also don't have to spend the wood or time to build the posts themselves. It saves you maybe about 500 or 600 wood, maybe more depending on how many walls you build, but it also saves villager seconds by the fact that they don't have to build the additional segments, which sometimes can add up to be quite a significant amount of time. Because if you think about it, if the villager can build this much worth of wall in however much time it takes, and it takes the exact same amount of time to build a post that's like this big, and then build another segment, you're wasting a lot of time. The Lancer nerfs have been undone. Lancers are back to their original stats. The main reason for the missionary no pop change is because Spain's essential problem is that they are at both a pop disadvantage and an econ disadvantage by the fact that they're having missionaries. So something that's really commonly done if you're playing German against Spain is to just delete down a ton of villagers and just overwhelm them. And then their army quality doesn't really make up for the fact that they can't keep up on pop and they just get flooded down. You don't even have to win it cost efficiently, you just have to flood them so much that they can't really beat you. The idea behind removing the pop from missionaries was to make it so that you would have slightly more population to make those situations maybe a little more fair. Rods are a pretty decent part of treaty games. Rods are a pretty decent part of treaty games in terms of how much they impact the matchups. It really just depends on like a civ by civ basis. For example, rods aren't going to make much of an appearance in this matchup. Maybe a handful if Lucas goes very heavy on hussars. But for the most part, you would actually expect to see just skirm native here because you're going to try to be more cost efficient. There are also certain matchups where if they're getting bludgeoned into, Spain prefers to use muskets instead of rods, but with the Infinite 10 rod card, you pretty much always upgrade them because at a certain point you just start sending them for free and they do a decent amount against Cav. This score difference is completely normal. Spain versus Brit. British should pretty much always be massively ahead in score, whereas Spain should pretty much always be down. At least before 40. Spain shouldn't reach much more than 2k at 40, maybe 2.1k with a near perfect boom. British should easily be reaching 2.7k, especially with wood trade. Which I guess we can take a look at and see what time he did it. 2811, that's a pretty normal time to send it. You can see he's got 47k wood here, so he has no real need to gather any more wood for the rest of the game. He is going to take a slight hit in his army to do that because he won't be able to get out both riding school and fencing school. So he's going to have to be prioritizing training muskets in the start, which is what you're going to do versus Spain anyway. There's also, I understand the points being made around team cards, but the potential downsides in Treaty are massive. A really good example that I always like to refer to of how team cards can completely distort matchups is if you have two people port mirroring and one person has a British and a German teammate, and the German teammate has sent Team Food Silos and Team 2 Settler Wagon, and the British has sent Team Rum Distillery. That Portuguese player, or the Portuguese player with that benefit versus a Portuguese player without, should never lose their matchup. if all else is equal, they should never lose the matchup because they should always be ahead on economy by the fact that they have two, or actually three additional economy cards over their opponent. Potential imbalances like that are extremely hard to deal with because it's basically just civ stacking and how that affects the game. That is one of the chief reasons why the patch removed all team effects, because the potential interactions were massive, and we felt it was more fair to simply remove the team effects than to try and individually balance them to make them insignificant, at which point the cards would largely be pointless to send. Minutemen come into the starting army because essentially the Minutemen will absorb one volley, even though they have only 1 HP. So if they absorb one skirm shot that would have hit your muskets, that alone has made them worthwhile, because your musket's now going to have 60 more HP or something like that, or 90 more HP. And they overkilled a unit with 1 HP. This is a pretty normal resource distribution. Spain's going to be spamming natives, so seeing 44k food, 10k wood, and 15k coin is not unusual. They're not going to try to contest artillery wars heavily. They're just going to try to run you down. Resource distribution for British is exactly what I would expect, of about 60k food, 45k wood because of the wood trade, and then about 45k coin. As I said, Lucas is now over 2700, so this is probably going to be like a 2780 British boom, which is just about where you should be hitting with wood trade. Well, we're even at 2800. So, 2799. That sucks. Okay, so first fight, Call Micro, always most important aspect of first fight. Here, Spain's objective is pretty much to try and get the rockets down. I mean, winning Call of War itself is nice, but if the rockets are still up, you are fucked. So you need to get the rockets down first, and then you can basically bludgeon them, and even if they win calls from there, start fight will generally be okay, because you can start to go Lancers immediately after, with Skirm supporting. Which you can see that's essentially what Sabusa did. He prioritized getting the rockets down, but unfortunately still lost the first fight, because rockets are incredibly cost efficient. We are dropping a handful of frames there. It looks like the server just shot itself and started dropping frames for a few seconds. My apologies. We're going to see essentially Skirm native for the rest of the game here, with Lancers occasionally. You're not going to try to contest artillery too much, maybe a little bit, just to help ensure that you're not getting completely destroyed. But that first fight went pretty poorly for Sabusa. He should really try to push, there we go, push the missionaries up just a little bit. Why is it dropping frames so bad? It's dropping frames really bad. Unfortunately, we're dropping frames pretty badly at this point. I think this particular server is just broken. I'm going to try something really quickly here. Go to windowed mode, that way I'm not tabbing in and out constantly. Let's see if that makes any difference. There we go. Now we're dropping frames a little. Looks like the frame drop is pretty much ended. The server's stabilizing, and we're back to being able to actually watch what's going on now. Sorry about that. So this is a matchup of British versus Spain. This is going to be a really, really hard matchup to win as Spain, especially with British getting such a great boom. And you can see the wood differential is going to make this painful as well, where Spain only has 6k wood. British still has 30k wood over him that he can just continue to use to bludgeon him with. Food difference is not that large, but I would expect to see Lucas transition to Mills fairly soon here. He's basically ignoring Mills for right now and just continuing to stick on his plantations. As he starts to get around the 20k mark, you generally switch over. Here, we're just going to see both players continue to stay popped. They're going to always have units in the queue, always be pumping stuff out. Spain really doesn't get much of an advantage in this matchup because of the fact that Lancers don't really do much. So you are mostly on a skirm native composition. You can also see that this is actually a decent matchup to bring out Musketeers for British, or for Spain, because Spanish muskets are actually not that bad. If you look at stats, here's a British musket, a red coat with 360 HP and 48 damage. With the infantry breastplate upgrade, Spanish muskets actually have almost the same HP. They're 8 HP less, but they have 80 range damage, which is very significant. So musket versus musket, you are actually more cost effective as Spain. The problem here is that British can just continue to spam. So you have to try and make this up by mixing in skirmishers and protecting them, because the skirmishers make you even more cost efficient. This is now turning into more of an artillery war, because otherwise, if he doesn't contest artillery, he's going to wind up losing, just in terms of cost efficiency due to the cannons. So he's got to contest artillery now. The muskets are to buffer, so if hussars come in, the muskets are already there. If you just produce pure natives, your natives are generally always going to be at the front contesting their natives. So you'd have to like push the natives around, move them, stuff like that. That would be pretty terrible or it's doable to micro it, but it's also not optimal. If you've got a handful of muskets to just kind of buffer, if those natives hit you, or if cav comes in and hits, the muskets are already there just buffering. And if you're fighting against muskets, they're not that bad to just buffer the front line because of their additional HP. If he can actually maintain a cannon advantage, and he's not, Lucas is outplaying him in Call of Micro right now, which is a fairly significant factor in this game. That scroll's going to keep driving me insane. But you can see Lucas is doing a better job of keeping his artillery up, his culves protected, making sure he's winning that. If Sabusa can win an art war, though, Spanish horse artillery is really good because of the aura. It's like heavy cannon levels of damage. So, essentially, we're just going to see this artillery war continue, and Brita's just going to go musket, native, cannon, with some occasional cav. So, this is a very standard thing to see here, is just British trying to dominate the artillery war, and then bringing out this ridiculous number of horse artillery. And you can see that this is... Sabusa should be able to maintain pop here. His macro is slipping some because he actually does have the resources for it. His production, or his, like I said, his macro must just be failing him here. Because he should be able to keep up his pop all the way up at 200 right now with the resources he has. Essentially, we're just going to see the vying for artillery control here, because now Spain is being forced to fall back, slow down, contest artillery, and just try to be more cost efficient so that they can drain out Brit. You can see the food differential is really not that high, but let's go ahead and check if there's already been a transition to mills, which there has. As I said, British will let their food go down pretty low because of the fact that you're gonna have an abundance of food income due to livestocking. So you just wait until you absolutely have to transition to milling, so that you wind up with a huge coin stockpile, and you don't have to worry about coin for a very long period of time. Then. You are seeing Sabusa kind of stabilize a little bit on his score here. He's been holding around this 1400 range for a while, but he's still draining resources, and Brit really is not. And that's a pretty significant problem for him. The other problem is that he's still not winning the Culverin more. He's not trading nearly as efficiently as Lucas is. A little bit of pack on pack there, which is very frustrating when you're dealing with Culverins. So here you're just going to keep seeing, as I said, the continual contesting of the artillery with... Dang it, that's scrolling. The continual contesting of artillery with the Culverins until eventually you pretty much either win because you've managed to drain someone, or you lose because you've been drained. And the big problem for Sabusa here is that Lucas has been able to have this batch of horse artillery out pretty much all game. And having that much horse artillery out basically means that he's been more cost efficient for the last couple of minutes, which is why Sabusa's draining at a faster rate now. It's really, really, really important that that you never lose art control of Spain in this kind of scenario. Couple of good cannon shots here could clear a huge portion of this infantry mass, but he'd also be risking losing them if he pushes them up too much. And you can see right there, lost calls, gotta pull all of his artillery back, can't contest it anymore. And now Sabusa is out of food, down to about 2k wood. So at this point, I think it's relatively safe to say that this is likely to go to Lucas. It's not... I guess I can't technically say it's over until someone says GG, but a comeback here would be legendary to come back from this position. That was a decent shot there. But you can see now he's having trouble maintaining pop. Lucas has really slipped on his macro, though, to be basically no food at this point. He needs to transition even more vills over to mills, and I would bet that his macro on livestock has also slipped throughout this game, because I can't imagine that you should be that drained but still have that much coin. You should either be transitioning basically everyone onto food and livestocking, and every round of livestock should basically replenish what you burn from milling in the meantime, or like your macro might just be slipping in that scenario. He should at least have like 6 to 8k food right now. Sabusa's not going to call it just yet. I mean, there's no point in basically surrendering, especially if you think there is any chance that you could recover. But this is a very, very over game. I would not be surprised to see a GG come reasonably soon here. The other problem is once the game slows down, it favors British, because British can then devote more APM and attention to livestocking, which just causes their economy to grow at a much faster rate. At this point, my thinking would be that unless Lucas messes up, he should be able to close this game out with an 800 point difference. And actually, if you think about it, the point difference is roughly what we had at the start of the game. Basically, British started up about 700, 800 points on Spain, and we're at this point in the game where Spain is basically down 800 points.